kind of a town-village balance. That's the core nucleus of the group that's putting the transition charter together. Hey, Andy. Okay.
Down outside the village.
Next slide here. So how we got here very quickly, again, I want to kind of address something that I sort of is reverberating through these public hearings, that there's this sort of existential struggle going on between the village and the town on the Select Board and the Trustees. For one, I'm kind of baffled. I'm fascinated to hear about it. But I think from our perspective, we've been working pretty closely together for the last 7 years. This started back in 2013 when the boards met and we started talking about sharing administrative services. At that point in time, the village manager had resigned, and rather than hiring another village manager, we had the idea of potentially having the town manager also become the village manager, and then slowly taking advantages of people retiring or leaving and growing. We thought we might be able to consolidate the administrations of the town and the village into one and see where that took us. See if that might be a different approach to consolidating the village and the town, or at least bringing us closer together and having better communication. So we, at that point, the two boards met, and we all unanimously want to make a point on the select board. There were 4 members from the town outside the village, and 1 person on the select board who was from the village. So again, this was not the village forcing something on the town. It was all done unanimously, willingly. I think if anyone had raised red flags, I don't think we would have gone forward with it. So we had a shared services report. Shortly after that, the town manager did become the village manager. Shortly after that, the village finance director became the finance director for the entire community, town and village. The village clerk became the clerk for the town and the village. And then we crossed a really big hurdle where we integrated the 2 public works budgets. The reasoning was we all drive on the same roads. They all require the same amount of maintenance. Roads don't know whether they're in the village or the town. So we decided we just consolidate their budgets and just have one bill that goes out to everybody. And that was great, and it's been working great ever since 2016. 2018, we hired Evan Teach, our new unified manager. That was significant because he was the first manager hired as a unified village town manager. Evan commenced an alignment process to look at village and town various departments, policies, and procedures, and started to bring them together. And that's been going on, and that's a great story. But again, I don't want to get too far into the detail. And under Evan, we also started meeting regularly, the Board of Trustees and the Essex Selectboard, having regular monthly meetings. And I think last year, probably half of our meetings were joint meetings like one we're having tonight. So again, the idea that we're struggling and we're forcing on each other, I don't know where that's coming from, and I hope we can get by that. One of the things that we knew eventually that we would probably need to restructure the government. We knew that this probably wasn't a sustainable thing, just having a shared administration. We knew that sooner or later we were probably going to have to change the board structure. So in 2018, the 2 boards appointed a governance subcommittee. That's what I introduced earlier, to begin looking at different governance models, looking at doing research and looking at different possibilities for changing the village and town government. All of this none of this was going to be something that we were going to do on our own. We always knew that it was going to have to be something that went out to the voters, but we wanted to do a lot. So we'll go to the next slide. So the governance subcommittee, very briefly, we reviewed over 12 local governance models. One of them included separating the village and the town. One of them included creating a city with a mayor. We looked at everything. We ranked all the different models. We had 17 criteria that included things like impacts on public safety, equal representation, economic sustainability, ease of public participation, and tax equity. So we ranked them all. And after ranking them all and debating all these different models, we decided that a unified charter model would be the best approach. This would be basically, almost the idea would be dissolving the village charter and just really revising the town charter. But it would have required such an extensive revision. It also seemed seemed perhaps a little more politically acceptable, the idea that we would just be creating a new town charter and incorporate, so that it doesn't, no one gets the impression that one party is eating up or, taking over the other. So that was our proposal. And then shortly after that, the joint boards, the trustees and the select board authorized us. They can't approve a charter, they can't approve anything like that, but they authorized the subcommittee to continue working on a unified charter. So we'll go to the next slide here. The key challenges, I think this has come up before, and probably from the previous public hearings, we know that we have representation as a hot issue. The other issue, of course, is the integrating the town and village operating budgets without an unacceptable increase in town outside the village. I'm just going to pick a side here. I do agree the village does tax itself to buy water slides, and we did buy ourselves a water slide. We also tax ourselves to buy the pool that the water slide is in. We tax ourselves to pay for the park and the park buildings. One of those buildings now houses the Essex Town Recreation Department. We tax ourselves to pay for the sidewalks and the streets and all the other sidewalks and streets in the village, along with the fire department, the library. In short, we tax ourselves to pay for all the same municipal services that other communities around Chittenden County have. But the difference, of course, is that we're also town citizens, and we pay taxes to the town to help pay for those services in the town. Now, you say, well, why doesn't the village just become independent? What's going on here? Look at the total operating budget for this entire county. The town is roughly around $15 million. The village is about $3.3 million, so slightly over $18 million. If we look at our total expenditures, and you base the idea of should we separate or merge on that, are we more joined by what we share or what separates us? And we are clearly much more joined at the hip by what we share. For example, the biggest bill is the police department. After that, it's the public works departments. Those are great big bills. We share those costs, okay? And so when people wonder why don't we just separate, that's part of the logic. So anyway, the other issue was designing a representative council model. This is different expectations, political views, and specifically voting district versus at-large elections. And again, we've seen how contentious this is. We understood it was going to be contentious going into it, and so we decided that we just needed to do a lot of research. As an aside, one of the things that we did was we hired Dan Richardson, who is an attorney in Montpelier, who is an expert on municipal law. He advised the governance subcommittee. The other thing we did is that we hired Kelleher, Sametz & Voke, a marketing company in Burlington that has done some work for government and nonprofits. We asked them to help us design a survey. The survey to get a general sense of people's feelings about merger, people's feelings about what kind of government structure they wanted to see, people's feelings about how we might want to integrate taxes. I just go a little bit more about the survey because it's been controversial here. When we put the survey together, we knew we had to balance brevity with thoroughness, okay? We couldn't ask every single permutation of every question we could think of. If we couldn't ask people to sit down and take a 45-minute or 1-hour survey, or our response rate would have gone right down. On the other hand, we wanted to get some answers to questions. So we sort of knew all along that a lot of people were going to want to send us a message through the survey, and if we didn't ask the right question, they were going to be frustrated. But unfortunately, we had to just leave some questions out. So we took the survey, and we had a great response. We had over 800 people, sort of just about split 50-50 between the village and the town. And so that was a pretty big piece of information that came back to us and informed us about about reputation, what was on people's minds. And really, we understood, and we've been criticized that, well, we didn't understand the details of the survey. No, what we saw and we wanted to look at were trends. And one of the trends we looked at is a lot of people liked at-large voting. A lot of people wanted to see district voting. There was not one specific model that clearly was head and shoulders above everything else. So, next slide. So to go back to Generally, what we're looking at right now in the charter is, besides the permanent component of the charter, is to have a transitional phase of the charter that will help transition from our two-government, two-board structure into a permanent structure. For 5 years, there will be a 7-member board. This is something we're proposing, and this could be a 7-member board with 2 town seats, 2 village seats, and 3 at-large seats. And it would be up to this board to develop a permanent model that could be any combination of the above. Also, during the first 5 years, we would organize town and village departments, building codes, municipal plans, ordinances, and so forth. The slightly controversial piece of this is what happens in the first 12 years. Now, if you think of talking about going back to incorporating the village's general fund budget into the town, if we did that all at once, folks, the average home in the town outside the village would see something on the order of a 24 to 25% tax increase, which I think in any reasonable person's mind is unacceptable. So it's the idea of phase this in. And this is not a new idea. When IBM decided it was no longer going to pay the town and the village a machinery and equipment tax, rather than take it out all at once, it phased it down over 14 years. It was rough. I was on the board for a lot of those years, and each year we had to have a $120,000 bite come out of our budget. But it was far better than losing. I can remember that the village was getting something like 2.5, and the town was getting about $2.8 million that year. So it would have been huge. So phasing in, that was the idea that occurred to us, that we might be able to phase in the reconciliation of the town and the village costs over 12 years. One of the things that this does is, by phasing it in, it takes advantage of risk. So in other words, the town and the village are growing. The wealthier, the larger your tax base gets, the more of the cost can get spread around. So it's not, you're not hitting individual homeowners as much. And we can talk about this a little bit more. So we'll just go to the next slide here. So to get to the representation piece, why a 7-member board with 2 town, 2 village, and 3 at large? First of all, it's an odd number of members avoids deadlock. Second, it balances the wishes of those favoring voting districts versus those favoring at-large voting. It addresses the concerns that we heard in the survey that some parts of the community could be marginalized. Particularly, we've heard of the more rural areas of Essex. It'd be hard for them to get a representative, so it's better. We want to have a couple of fixed seats on the new merged board, so we can kind of make sure that at least we get here. The 2+2 district, it also gives you, make sure that you have some diversity. It is possible if you had all at large, you could only get all town or all village voters. So we wanted to build in some diversity in this transitional phase. The 3 at large component, however, embodies the idea that board members represent the entire community. It is, we all like to say when we're elected, we represent the entire community, but when only half of the community is voting for you, it's kind of hard to say that. So it kind of balances that. Lastly, we had asked the senior analyst for KSV to give us his assessment of what the survey was saying about representation. And he came up with he came up with the same idea. He came up with the same result, that some kind of a hybrid mix of at-large and district might be the best way to go. So go to the next slide. So why not and we've heard this tonight, why not a 7-member board with 3 from the town, 3 village, and 1 at large? And I think Andy touched on a little bit of this at the beginning of the meeting. And so, Andy, I'm going to probably repeat a lot of the things you said. We actually explored this concept back in November of 2018 as part of the legal research we were doing on board structures, and we were looking at even-numbered boards at that time. And our attorney said there were no state statutes against even-number boards, and you could have them. But an odd number is implied by the Selectboard statutes, and that an odd number is a practical requirement. Now, what he's saying, and I haven't had time to verify this, but I'm going to do a little bit of interpretation here. There's nothing in the charter right now, if you had an even-number board, that says, here's how you break a tie, okay? And I want to get a little bit of a practical issue, just for consideration about why a tie, it might be a little problematic on the Select Board or the Trustees right now. The Select Board and the Trustees right now are putting together budgets for the coming annual meetings. We have about a month and a half to take a multi-million-dollar budget that staff prepares for us, discuss it, change it, talk to department heads, warn it publicly, and then put it on a ballot. And it has to be voted to put on a ballot. The Select Board has to pass it. They have to have a majority has to say yes, put it on a ballot. If that's a very tight window. If they became deadlocked in the middle of that process with no breaking a tie, I'm baffled. I don't even know what would happen. You would miss your window for warning the budget. So you'd have some serious problems there. So I think this is the issue. It's not that we're trying to thwart democracy or stop something from happening, but there are a lot of ramifications from having an even number board that you have to think about. And I think that was one of the issues. So one of the other things that the council advised us is that in communities, as Andy pointed out, where there are even number boards, typically they have a mayor to break the tie. And so if you think about it, and this is some of the discussion we had, if we had a 3-3-1 model, you'd have three people who would have to run an election in the town or whatever district, 3 who would run in another district, but 1 person has to run at large. Well, if you're that 1 person on a 7-member board, that's a kind of unfair position from a perspective anyway. What does this 1 person get for having to run a community-wide race? And so we, at the time, debated and discussed, well, maybe that person would automatically become chair of the board. Maybe that person would become the spokesperson for the community. Maybe that person would become the liaison between the board and the manager. Well, if you look around Vermont at most communities that have mayors, that's what mayors do. That's what mayors are. Now, that was the reason we put the question about mayors on the KSV survey. And I think, as Andy alluded to, the response we got was overwhelmingly negative, and we looked at a lot of the comments associated with the questions, and I think there was a lot of misunderstanding about what a mayor is. Some mayors have a lot of power, have a lot of administrative and managerial authority. Most mayors, at least in Vermont, are what are called weak mayors, really certified board members. Usually maybe don't even vote on normal board business, but they do vote to break a tie. But we could understand people getting upset about and concerned about a mayor, considering that the former mayor of Burlington is leading the Iowa caucus right now. So why we made the 2-2-3 model temporary instead of saying, let's make this a permanent model. Well, right now we have estimates of what the populations of the village and the town are. We don't know for sure. We won't know until the 2020 census is out. And so we don't have to have a permanent representation model, we would need to, or want to start with really accurate counts. And also, as we've said, as a number of people have said, you'd need some mechanism for adjusting the boundaries to allot for population growth. State statute says you can't have a difference between one district or another. The other issue we had was that we were concerned about, at this stage, institutionalizing a permanent town and village dynamic on the board. Some people may think it's necessary, but a lot of people think if we're trying to create a new community with a new outlook, a new perspective, a new understanding of who we are, do we really want to anchor ourselves to the past and say, yeah, we're a new community, but we're still going to stick with this village-town thing and have it incorporated right onto the board? Many community members said they very much favored districts, but not village-town voting districts. They voted districts, for example, that incorporated the rural area of Essex and maybe incorporated just the more developed part of the village and the suburban area of the town. Maybe you could have districts that have a little slightly different, very complex. There's a lot of different possibilities. And so our idea was, and really most communities that do districting, they usually hire a third party or appoint some kind of a committee to study districting and really do a good job with it. And so our thought was, if we have a 5-member board, a 7-member board, and they have a window to work in, they can take on that task and really have a good, solid, long, open, transparent community conversation about what kind of districts we want to see here in Essex. And I added the last little bit here, and I'm sorry I ad-libbed a little bit, but I thought that maybe before we had that discussion about what kind of districts we want in Essex, maybe we want to put a little bit of the tension of the village-town stuff behind us, because it can be a politically issue. So maybe if we had a merger and you have a board that now can sort of draw its breath and take it easy, now they can do a really good, thorough job about districting. So go to the next slide. To go to the tax reconciliation piece, so over a 12-year phase-in period, the village would be, and these are just technical designations, and I think it's unfortunate. This is sort of the legal stuff that we have to do in order to phase in the tax differential between the village and the town. So one of the things we would do is the village for a 12-year period would be designated as a debt assessment district. It would pay off the residual debt that's just unique to the village. So that debt wouldn't be transferred over to the town or to the town general fund. The second piece is that village would be designated as a tax reconciliation district for the same reason of gradually phasing in the village's grand list at the amount that at the beginning of the charter, at the point of merger, and gradually phasing that amount in over 12 years. And the estimate right now is somewhere in the vicinity of $23 to $24 if we just did that per year. That would be the transfer to the town outside the village, average home. So the next piece we then looked at, we tried to think of some further ways of further lowering down that effect of transferring the village's costs into the town. And we looked at what other communities have done, and we tried to get some ideas about what we might do here and what might be possible and viable here with the legislature. And one of the things we thought of was that the village could be designated as a sidewalk district. Right now, the village spends money on sidewalks. It spends about $120,000 a year clearing sidewalks in the wintertime. Town has sidewalks, absolutely, but the town sidewalks are not a coherent network. They tend to be in developments, and they're not plowed and maintained in the wintertime as aggressively. So we thought we might be able to make a case for calling the village a sidewalk district for a period of 12 years, where maintenance of the sidewalk would just stay with the village. That cost would not be transferred over to the town. Same thing for the village's capital improvement list. Right now, town and village both have lists of streets and other infrastructure repairs that they want to get to. Right now, we all share the cost of paying for the town's capital repairs, but only the village pays for the cost of the village's capital repair. So we keep it that way for a little bit longer, and the village would just, for a period of 12 years, just pay its own capital infrastructure costs and not transfer those costs over to the town. Lastly, one of the other things we had in mind was there are several communities that have charters that have designated downtowns. Bennington was one of the examples we looked at. These are older communities that have little old downtowns that they're trying to revitalize, as we are doing in Essex Junction. And right now, we have a special tax, an economic development tax, in the village, and that money is used just to improve the village center. And the idea is that we would keep, maybe not that entire tax, but we would keep part of that tax in place. It would not be transferred over to the town. It would further reduce the impact of transferring the village's cost into the town, and would also ensure that our revitalization efforts in the village continue. So we'll go to the next slide. Some of the other things that we are recommending, first of all, is that we would move from having a voice vote to having an Australian ballot for the budget. The budget would be approved by by an Australian ballot. The annual meeting in March, therefore, that typically happens for the town and for the village, it's in April. That would be an informational meeting. And at the end of the informational meeting, the town meeting would be suspended for a month, and then you would take it back up in April, and we would vote on the same day as the Essex Westford School District vote. So it would be one vote, one Australian ballot vote for school district, elected officials, municipal budget. The name of the new community would be Essex. The present incorporated village of Essex Junction would be the unincorporated village of Essex Junction, just as White River Junction is the incorporated village in the town of Hartford. And then I also wanted to address something that wasn't really part of the local governance committee's concern, but I did want to mention it because it keeps coming up. We heard in the survey a lot of concern about water and infrastructure and I don't want to be paying for someone's water bills and their water lines are old and so forth. Water and sewer bills in the village and the town are paid by, those costs are paid by water bills. They're not paid by municipal taxes. And that wouldn't change. So sewer line, if you live in the town, and I've heard a number of people say, well, I'm on septic, and why would I have to start paying? Well, you wouldn't. Nothing would change in terms of what we're currently paying for water and sewer costs on either side of the board. And the last point I wanted to make is that the new community would acquire all the assets of the existing communities, and one of those assets would be Essex Junction's water treatment plant, which I think the trustees are very proud of. It is a state-of-the-art, extremely well-run, very, very safe facility. Right now, it's owned by the village. It's funded by the tri-town of Williston, Essex Town, and Essex Junction as part of our sewer rates. And that water treatment plant would become part of the new community. And with that, I'm going to wrap up. I hope that was quick enough, and thanks.
George, thank you so much.
Yep.
In addition to thanking you and for the presentation as well, also appreciate the full members of the governance subcommittee, because clearly without the work of the subcommittee, this would not happen. So, Max, George, sincerely thank you for getting this together and all the work you've done. So thank you. At this point, what we would love to do is we have some special guests. We really appreciate you, as has already been said, taking the time to be out here tonight on your normal off night. So thank you. And hoping that you would be willing to introduce yourselves for those who may not know who you are, and to let us know what your thoughts are and to what you've just heard.
Senator
Mr.
Ash.
Good evening. Okay. Tim Ash, Senator for Chittenden County, amongst some of my peers here. So thank you. That's a very helpful and comprehensive presentation. One of the things that would be most helpful for me, and I understand a lot of things yet to be devoted, all these other things, but what I get the sense that there's some concern about areas where the legislature may not be willing to approve a charter change if we are presented with one, and I'm hoping that maybe you could flag some of the areas of concern, because we face charter changes all the time. They're usually very non-controversial once a community has voted for it. What are some of the caution flags this time that make you particularly anxious about how we might dispose of this?
Yeah, if I can, the taxing districts, the taxing, I'm pretty sure our debt assessment district of keeping the village's debt separate from the rest of the town, I think that's fine. But declaring the village a special district for the purpose of reconciling the tax rates, sidewalk to capital district, they were a little unusual. But I think that without some way of gradually putting these budgets together, I think would face a major hurdle. I don't think what we're asking for is outrageous. As I understand it, our attorney has already met with the tax department, but it really would be with the government ops committee to look at this and, how can I say it, cut us some slack here. I don't think it's outrageous. I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty solid, and I think our numbers are going to be pretty good, but I think it's a little unusual what we're asking for.
If I could just follow up quick, is there anything about this merging relating to the taxes that has any effect on the state's revenues?
Not that I'm aware of. But one thing it will do, which I would also mention legislature, is that right now Global Foundries is in Essex Junction. Right now Global Foundries gets 2 property tax bills. Global Foundries would only get 1 property tax bill. You might want to mention that to some people. It gets a village tax bill and it gets a town tax bill. And all of a sudden it would only get 1 tax bill, and that tax bill would probably go down.
Okay, so I just want to introduce myself. I'm Senator Ginny Lyons. I live in Williston, and I'm very much connected to Essex Junction and Essex Town itself. So, but, you know, it seems to me that your concerns are probably valid ones, but the way you explain the transition particularly for the tax district, I think is very logical. So if you continue to work with the tax department, and as you said, bring information into the GovOps committees, I think that I certainly will be supporting the good work that you're doing.
Thank you.
The issue is what the vote will be once the charter is put together, and each vote that you have going forward will be very important. When votes are close, then legislators tend to have their own individual concerns, but I'm sure you've heard that. But, I think for those of us who are familiar with Essex Junction and have represented you, I think I look forward to seeing all of this fall together. Thank you for your good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Senator Sirotkin.
You did it on microphone.
So I'm Michael Sirotkin, and I, what's so funny?
Use the mic.
There's a microphone. There's a mic right over here, too.
Ah. Anyhow, I raised my family, TOV, we didn't have that term back then, for 25 years in the town of Essex. And I really want to thank you for taking this on. I remember 25 years ago or more, my late wife, Sally Fox, was a representative for 16 years of the town, and I always used to say to her, how does this work between the town and the village? And even though she was a representative, she had a really hard time explaining it to me. But I think we both realized that there was some value in consolidation and that it should be explored with some level of energy. And I realize that in some ways it could be a thankless task, but I think it's worth looking at. And I would hope that even though George raises some legitimate concerns the legislature may have, I think it's generally the way of the legislature if the town and the village vote to govern themselves in such a way, the presumption is and the default is going to be they're going to try and find a way to accept that. So it's still up to you, obviously, to get it through all the contentiousness that's going on here, but it must be countless hours, I can only imagine.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mike, I remember Sally very well, and she was a good friend, and she was a great lady.
I'm Debbie Ingram. I'm another one of the senators for the county, and I'm very sorry I was late because I was at another meeting that got to be extremely contentious, and I was so happy to walk down the hall and not hear any shouting or anything going on here. So I have a lot of praise for the hard work that you've been doing to work this out, and I would agree that if you can come to agreement and if you can educate the voters, and especially given the long history of kind of going back and forth and and the challenges that you faced over the years, I think that I'd be very happy to support you. I'm sure we could persuade our colleagues at the state level to to support you. So good on you for doing such a good job.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chris Pearson, another one of your senators. I feel like an old-timer here. 13 years ago, I was in the House, and I served on a with Debbie Evans and Tim German, and they were, I think, on opposite sides of this issue. So they gave me a little briefing back then, and I've been kind of curiously watching from afar. So I'll just echo the colleagues. Thank you for the laborious task. I'm sure it's often thankless. And we look forward to seeing what the community comes up with. I would tend to agree that it will not be a big issue if the community speaks clearly. There's not an impact for the ed fund in particular for the state. That's what we're always watching. I wouldn't let that keep you up at night. You'll have many more details to sweat through, but I wouldn't say the legislature is one of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Lori Houghton. So I serve as a House of Representatives in District 8-2, which is Essex Junction. I want to just say two things. One is I was a trustee when we started these conversations back in 2013, and quite frankly had to leave the board last year because of the countless hours that you all are putting into this. So I know the hard work. Whether or not the people in the audience agree or disagree, I think a level of respect and thank you has to come forward, because I know this is a volunteer job and you're putting your heart and soul in this, so thank you. And I also want to apologize to my colleagues, because I meant to send an email today and didn't have time, but George and I have been in contact. I have some documents that outline everything. I've talked to the chair and the vice chair of the Government Ops Committee in the House. I'll be sending them the information. We'll be meeting with Legislative Counsel. I'll let you know when the meeting is, so you can all attend if you'd like to get their feedback on what's been presented tonight as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori.
Thanks, Lori.
So I'm Linda Myers from the town outside the village, and having served on the select board for 13 years, I understand what you all are going through. If I remember correctly, I was on the select board, was it 2007, when was the last time we had the last major vote? And so I remember what happened then. I commend you for what you're doing. I think you've come up with a good plan. I agree with the senators that as long as, and I say this because I remember the Appropriations Committee, as long as it doesn't in some way affect the taxes of the state, it should not be a major issue to go through the House Government Operations Committee and then the floor of the House and the Senate.
Thank you.
I'm Bob Bancroft, and I'm sort of a hybrid here. I am not a resident of the Junction, nor of the town at all. I live in Westford, and I represent what I call the rural part of Essex, with one little section where you have sidewalks, so I actually can park a car and walk. My comments are really kind of directed because I was here for the first part of the meeting, and what I heard today is what I hear at the rural versus the urban suburban area, and Reed, Burlington, Chittenden County, I guess you should say. And it's a real concern. You ask anybody in the Northeast Kingdom how they feel about this kind of union, and their concerns are much different than the concerns of the people in Chittenden County. You know, I go back to the school merger, and that was a very contentious item in Westford. There was this concern about not having any control and that our interests wouldn't be cared for, and it divided the town pretty well. And I still have my crystal ball, and it still works a little bit. And looking back, I think if it wasn't for the tax advantages, I don't think the merger would have been approved in Westford. So I guess what I'm saying, it comes down to really, I want to reinforce it's a money issue. That's all I'd say.
Thank you, Bob.
Let's see if I can get that. Dylan Giambattista here in the village. Appreciate the thorough presentation, and I know so much work has gone into this, and appreciate the community voice that has been brought here tonight. In the legislature, the matter of disposing of a municipal charter, short of a constitutional implication, typically is quite quick. And so there have been several conversations, I know, to get information on that front. We'll have open communication as everyone has expressed, and I hope that offers reciprocated, and just know that we're happy to be a resource. I just can't help but reflect on the comments of Jerry Fox earlier about Essex and the community that we're in the next 20 years or so. Your proposal, I think, deals a great deal with the short and midterm, and there are many residents thinking about the long term as well. So I hope and I trust that the viewpoint of that long-term consideration of where are we going will be baked into the community discussion. It sounds like it already is. But if we think about what's going on with increased regionalization, with the increased demands on both volunteer and positions, both at the municipal and state level of government, we are going to face challenges. We know that we have some tough demographic headwinds, and I think that there's a growing sense and understanding of the urgency of this moment, that we have the best structures available to work on these shared challenges and turn them into the next opportunities. So I would encourage you to continue your work. We have a lot of work to do, and you're all doing it. So I appreciate that, and I just hope that as we proceed here, we're cognizant of that, and that this community process recalls and remembers where we've been and where we're going, because we got a lot of work to do. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Hi, Mary Beth Redmond, representative representing Chittenden 8-1, town outside the village. You know, I mean, the amount of work done here is profound, and I'm really grateful for it. I guess and my job, as with all of my colleagues, is to shepherd the voter's voice, through the halls of the State House. I mean, that's ultimately, and I'm prepared to do that. My biggest concern is communication, and I am so biased because I am a communications person, and I really, and you all have made amazing efforts to communicate, and I feel like there is confusion, and that's what keeps me up at night, is just the fact that, even sitting here tonight, I'm someone who's plugged into this process, and there were so many nuances to what you all come up with that, in my mind, are really amazing and brilliant thinking through of things, taxes and sidewalk districts, and I wasn't aware of all of that. So really my, kind of where I'm coming at it from is, I think, figuring out how to really distill this information to folks so that they know the thoughtfulness that has gone into this. That's my biggest concern. I am concerned with the confusion that reigns and the lack of understanding in the community. And I would really underscore what Dylan said. I think it's a really important point. Vermont is, we have real demographic challenges. We all know that. And I think communities need to look at how to be creative together, how to really leverage strengths in order to draw economic opportunities to their communities. I think that's a very, very important thing to be thinking about for all of Vermont communities as we go forward. And so this feels like an opportunity. It really does. And, I am at your service, however I can be helpful. I appreciate everyone coming out tonight, and I really appreciate the invitation for the whole delegation to be here. I think it just, we all work together really well, and so when we're all on a par with the information, it really adds to our effectiveness. So thank you.
Thanks, Mary Beth.
Thank you.
All right. Do board have any questions for our delegation that they might not have spoken about? Trustees or select board members?
No.
Okay.
Looks
Well,
good on this side.
pardon me?
Looks good on this side.
Thank you. We thank you for your time. We really want to impress upon you, I think we did, hearing from your comments, and we're very grateful for your support of the effort we've made. We just want to impress upon you the amount of due diligence we have done and will continue to do. And by saying that to you, I want to say that to the entire community. We have really been tireless in pursuing this, and we're trying to get it right. So we're really asking everybody's support and understanding as we try to get it right. So thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Can I make a quick comment? I wanted to follow up on some of what Elaine said, and I really do appreciate you all being here, because positive responses to your support kind of recharged me with regard to being willing to continue to deal with this. And so thank you for that.
That's called electrification.
Yes. Annie?
Andy just literally brought tears to my eyes because like literally Andy just made me cry because it's true. It's hard to, as you must know, right? You must know it at a deeper level, at a higher level, at a bigger level. But a lot of negativity can make you very, very, very tired, most especially when you're just trying to do your best and be morally sound. And so I'm just taking a long time to echo Andy's gratitude.
Okay?
Good job.
Of course, Max.
And I know that we said that this is a day off, and you actually get days off. It's just the legislature's not in session on Mondays. So.
Excuse me.
Corporation meets 5 days a week.
I stand corrected. Representative Myers, thank you.
I came.
So, even more so, we really thank you for taking time out of your already extremely busy schedule to come and hear this and provide your input back to us. So thank you for that.
And we are always here for you. If you have questions, if constituents come to you, please come to us and let us know what you're hearing, and we will do the same. We'll keep in touch. And thank you again. We can't tell you how much we appreciate your being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good. Was it all right?
Okay, let's take like 2 minutes, and then we'll reconvene.
care what the day is.
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. If you're going to have a conversation, please keep it down or take it to the hallway. Thank you. All right, we're going to continue with the agenda for the joint meeting. Is there the public to be heard? Is there anybody who has comments to be heard that are not on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to business item 5B. Review and consider approval of draft Essex merger vote 2020 FAQ for use at upcoming public meetings and events. Greg, do you want to kick that off, or is there any staff prelude to this?
Sure, I'll speak to it.
Thank you.
So this is something that Ann James, the project manager of the governance subcommittee, put together. It's, as we often do around this time of year, we put together some FAQs about upcoming issues that the boards can talk about at annual meetings. And with merger vote scheduled for November 3rd, 2020, and some discussions expected at town village meeting, we figured we should put something together. So it's just a short document, a couple pages, and some supporting information that try to answer some of the questions about the merger that we've heard.
Thank you, Greg. I guess what we can do is, I'm going to do it board by board. So, select board members, do you have any comments or questions about this FAQ?
It's updated with the changes that I had requested, so I'm good.
Okay. Andy, I thought you might have had some questions.
Yeah, I do, and I apologize for not getting my comments in earlier to I know the governance subcommittee had been asked to put them in early and had a family situation that didn't allow that. But at the bottom of the first column, the last few words, it says "and focus groups," and I remember that KSV often corrected us to say that they weren't really, that the formal definition of a focus group wasn't really what they did. It was more of a listening session. So I thought it may be a small. I thought maybe we should change that word to listening session to be more consistent with what the definition of a focus group is. That was one change that I would propose, and the other is related to comments that others have made in public meetings here. Is that it's at the bottom of the second page where it talks about the cost to the average town property owner being between $20 and $30 a year. It makes it, the way it's written, it sounds like it's only $20 or $30 a year, but it's $20 and $30 increase every year. And I think we just need to make that language clearer, unless I'm completely misunderstanding.
No, it's the idea is it's incrementally increased at $20 to $30.
Yeah, but it's not clear though. That I mean, I could read this to say,
yeah,
it's a $25 increase over 12 years, which is only going to cost me $300. No big deal. But if you math it out to a $25 increase every year, it's $1,950 over that 12-year period. Right. So I just I don't want to give fodder to people to criticize that piece of it, for one.
Yep.
And just to make it so it's clearer that, and we're not intentionally trying to obfuscate it, I know that, but the language that I would like to propose is that it should say the tax impact of merger with over a year, period. The annual impact for residents of the town outside the village would be an increase between $20 and $30 each year over that time period.
That's, I don't know.
So that it's clear that it's an increase every year, not just an additional $25 every year. It's an increase.
I think that sounds good.
Yeah.
My problem is with the amount. I mean, if all of everything we put in place, it might be much. It could be lower. It could be more like $17 or $18.
Right.
So
I know. But it's.
I mean, but I think the language is fine. I think the language is fine.
And I did send this language to Greg.
Okay.
You have that, right, Greg?
Yes.
And Ann, I haven't sent it. Yes. Yeah. All right.
Any other select board members with comments on the FAQ? I know I had sent a handful of comments. Do you have those? So we're going to see another version of this?
If the boards are comfortable with approving it tonight with the changes we've discussed, that's probably the fastest way to start getting it out there.
Okay,
Yeah, the first session for handing stuff out is tomorrow night.
tomorrow, that's right. Okay.
Discuss your changes.
We could omit this one if we're not ready, but
I'm good with all the changes.
I think
Max.
previous practice has been that we would go with the best version we have to date, knowing that as more information comes in to make it more clear, that we can then update it, so that by the last outreach, we'll maybe have the final version, but I wouldn't hold off approving it tonight, because it's not perfect.
You're right, Max. It is some of the things that we've done with the pre-FAQs as to why we do this, websites, since that does align with our practice. I think Annie.
Annie,
Really
thank you. I know, this whole
And this
long
long
thing is,
table.
yeah,
To
it's
let you
really,
know.
Annie.
Sorry, I overdid that. All right, I overdo it. My thought is that it would be very confusing to me if I received one version and then my friend had a similar looking but differently worded one. So I would say, with all the things that we are doing to try to be really clear, changing language on a handout that looks the same is probably not a good idea with all that we are working on.
What if we have the version on the date at which this was done? I think we would really be missing an opportunity.
To grow it?
If we wait until it's perfect, because it will never be perfect. None of them will ever be perfect.
Right, except
Good idea,
can't we just not change it? Like, can't we just commit to whatever we're gonna do, whatever we're gonna hand out the first day? Let's just stick it.
Because I think you want continuous improvement.
Yeah,
In all things we do.
And some of the dollar amounts and things, we might,
Oh.
it's not clear
Well-
that those are fixed just yet. That's the range, but we'd like to narrow that down, so, yeah.
Maybe then, can we make it very, very clear that it's, am I driving you nuts?
No,
That it's a different, like what Max said, yes, the version, but maybe be clear on the headline of it. Maybe put some language in it at the top where the headline's gonna say version 2, version 3. This is an ongoing, please look forward to more versions.
Craig, I think we could probably version it at the top of the page as opposed to the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah. We could probably accommodate that,
And then
for
let
sure.
it say, please look, so that you know when you get this, that you might wanna go find out what the next
The next
chapter
one,
is or whatever.
right.
Like, so version 1, please look forward to
Yes.
it'd be like crazily, I'm sorry, I'm really emphatic because I'm really nervous about it. Thanks.
Thanks, Annie. Yeah.
Trustees?
I'm good.
I would clarify that and just say instead of version number
the select board, for those of you who have stuck around, we will pick the meeting back up where we left off, which was business item 6A, approval of fiscal year 2021 capital budget and 5-year plan. Can I get a motion from someone to approve the capital budget?
I move